Hello again, I am Blunty. A couple of days ago I put up an extensive video breaking down everything I love about the new iPhone Pro Max. Damn it, I got it wrong. iPhone 11 Pro Max. So close. It's been days now. I'm close to getting the name right every time I need to say it without having to concentrate and think about it real hard. iPhone 11 Pro Max. That thing. And in that video, I made the argument for, even though it has a new wide-angle front-facing camera, which is what this is, and it has a brand new ultra-wide-angle rear-facing camera joining the regular wide-angle and the telephoto cameras on the back there, you still may need one of these lovely little extension snap-on ultra-wide-angle lenses, or fisheye lenses. This one's from BitPlay. And I showed a couple of examples of why you may still want to carry one of these around with you, even though you've got an ultra-wide-angle built onto the phone itself. And it basically has to do with the fact that the ultra-wide-angle on the camera has a smaller aperture, so it lets in less light. And I think the sensor is probably slightly lesser as well. Certainly, we've already seen in the deep dive technical readout stuff that some of the app developers have done, that you don't have the same range of ISOs or shutter speeds on the sensor that comes with the ultra wide angle lens than you do with the standard lens. So what I thought I'd do in this video is take another closer look at that under some controlled circumstances back here with exactly the same lighting, and sort of swap back and forth between this and see what we're talking about, because there is another gotcha with that rear camera as well, which I didn't mention in the original video because, well, frankly, I forgot to. I was gonna, but I forgot to. We'll get to it now though.
First up, while it's hard to see in the larger scale shots I did for the other video, in these closer ones you can clearly see there is indeed a very slight difference in the field of view. Nothing that really affects use, composition or framing decisions or options, but it's there if you're curious how close it was. Under low to moderate lighting, where I'm using some coloured lights for the edges and backlighting and a small LED panel on a low setting for subject lighting, you can see the standard lens with adapter delivering a slightly crisper image. And mainly due to the wider native lens seeing more of the yellow box, its auto white balance is also shifted a bit too. The white balance thing isn't a killer, as for anything I'm intending to use for important content, I'll almost always use a third-party app where I do have manual control over settings like white balance anyway. Turning off the key light, we can see the main camera with the clip-on lens giving us a more delicate roll-off in tones, and we're starting to see just a little hint of noise creep in, as the lower aperture of the native ultra-wide lens means the sensor is boosting sensitivity to keep up with the available light. Turning off all but the red backlight, and the noise becomes more apparent in both cameras. But again, as expected, the native wide-angle camera is just a bit more thirsty for light, so the noise from boosting the ISO gets more pronounced. And finally, with all lights off and the only light in the room coming from my monitors a few meters away, the sensitivity difference and the larger aperture makes the difference between something moderately useful if you've got no other option for adding light for whatever reason, and an image just too dark to be practical at all. In photo mode, the story is much the same across the board with the exception of the zero light shots. Here, the difference between not having the new night mode on the native ultra-wide versus the long exposure computational night mode on the standard camera with the attached lens is, well, to use the vernacular, it's like night and day. And now to that so far unmentioned gotcha of the new ultra-wide camera. It's fixed focus, which is actually perfectly fine from almost every use you want it for. In fact, most reviews of the cameras, you'll see people don't mention it because they might not even have noticed. Because for a lens this wide, on a sensor like this, with an aperture like this, basically any subject you shoot from a short way in front of the lens all the way to infinity will be in focus, as just the nature of ultra-wide lenses. The exception, the gotcha, comes for when people like me who sometimes like to do close-ups of products and whatnot, even with a wide-angle lens. But you just can't do a macro-like focus with the native ultra-wide. I'll admit, it is an unusual and niche use case. It's not even something I do very often, but it is also another very compelling reason to still own an ultra wide-angle adapter, which is kind of the point of this video, showing you why you would still want one of these things. Because the standard camera will focus through these adapters, and you can get quite close while doing so for some really fun shots. With the native ultra-wide-angle lens, you can still tap to set exposure and manually adjust it just as you would with other cameras, but doing this does not refocus it. It can't. It literally doesn't have the hardware to refocus. It is what camera nerds call fixed focus. And related pro tip while we're at it, if you are doing stuff like this, use a third-party app like Filmic Pro or the Moment app, which is what I'm using for these demos. Both have superb implementations of full manual focusing while filming, so you can do fun stuff like rack focus. Perhaps even more importantly, they also have focus peaking modes, making it vastly easier to just nail focus while you're at it. And out of interest, if you put the wide-angle adapter lens on the telephoto lens, you get another shot option with a slightly different aesthetic because the original focal length changes the way the background to foreground compression works.
So there you go, accessory lens makers, for Apple products at least, not out of business quite yet. I will still be having this in my gear bag when I'm out shooting sort of deliberately, or when I'm shooting an event or something like that. And just in case we hit one of those low light areas where I want to go ultra wide angle and the lighting's just a little bit too low for the sort of built-in one, like in Razer's booth, by the way. I'm about to do PAX Australia in a couple of weekends time, and Razer, if there's anyone from Razer watching in Australia, your booth is always too dark. You have a black booth, black shelves, black products. Also, your RGB looks nice, but it makes it impossible to photograph your stuff. I'll bring a light this time. But thank you for watching. Hopefully this has been useful, or at least interesting. Do the thing where you subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll pretend it matters. We'll pretend YouTube cares. I care. Hit the buttons, people, please. And I'll catch you next time.